Hello, hello. Happy Thursday. Master3307, hello, welcome to the channel. All right. Oh. Move this a little bit. Good enough. We're sitting today, so the green screen's a little upset. It's got to be a little farther back than it normally is. I am feeling deeply lazy, but that's okay. It's refactor week. We don't have to do anything new. We just have to make what we've already got better. And that's what we're going to do. This whole refactor week thing is like very contrived. Like it's like, you know what? I don't want to move on to some new features until I've tightened up some other stuff. And I just kind of arbitrarily was like, let's make a week of that. But now I think it's a concept I'm going to bring back again. Like maybe like every couple of months or something like that. Every like 2 or 3 months, we're just like, let's have a refactor week and let's just tighten everything up. Let's do all the stuff that we feel like normally it would be irresponsible to do because we should be working on new features. Let's just designate like a safe time to like do that. Hey, Smooth in a second. How's it going? It's getting warm down here. I can only imagine temperatures like up where you are. Even in San Francisco, we're getting into like the 70s. It's cold actually? Oh, well, that's weird. I don't understand how the weather works. And apparently no one else does either, so I guess it's fine. All right, so what we kind of messed around with yesterday once we did the actual thing we were trying to do. You were gone? No worries, Master3307. Welcome back. How's it going? Welcome to the channel. I'm doing good. We're kind of doing refactors, I was saying. We have this made up construct that we've called refactor week, which is like a safe time to like work on improving stuff that we've already done. And I think right now that means messing around with the underlying entity component system, specifically how we handle dynamic buffers. I think I need to fix. I both need to make them actually dynamic, which we haven't really put much work into. Right now they're static, so they get declared once, and you can't really change their size. And then the other thing is I want to like work on how we structure our buffers. I was messing around with this yesterday. We were talking about ref structs, and I tried to like make components ref structs, but that doesn't work for reasons, mainly around the limitations around the current implementations of span and read-only span. But I was thinking we might be able to make the buffers themselves ref structs. Hey, Matthew Sparks, you're in a meeting right now. Please, God, save you from these people. Refactor their brains. Yeah, that's like, what do they call that? Re-education camps. We refactor your mind. Sorry, you're stuck in a meeting like that. I generally like all the people that I work with. I really haven't had like, I mean, at least currently in my current position. I've definitely been in positions before where I've had like disagreed or kind of had like weird personality mismatches with people I had to work with, but that's all it really was. It was like just incompatibilities of like temperament. But yeah, I can't imagine. To be fair, I don't usually have to talk to anyone with an MBA, which I think is what would really get me. Oh, Master3307, you made the jump to YouTube. How's it going? Appreciate you popping around. You'll notice you're enjoying a 4K. Yeah, who's Master3307? I'm this totally new person. You are a new person. You were a first-time chatter in Twitch. Oh, thank you for the follow on Twitch. The whiplash. I'm getting whiplash from this platform jumping. Oh, smooth into second. Also, I really appreciate the stat padding, guys. I really appreciate that. Making my viewership look like twice as what it is. If everyone could just watch me both on YouTube and Twitch simultaneously, that'd be great. Thanks. Feed the algorithm. Matthew, your department's great. It's the other departments that are the issue. Fair enough. You're currently meeting with people about how requiring someone to click twice to navigate the new platform is too complex. Who's the one saying it's too complex, though? Is it you or them? So I kind of get it. If I'm not gonna lie. You always think it's always the joke. You're like, people are gonna understand how to use this interface. And then there's always the meme of like the interface, and it will show some insane thing that people are doing that you'd never imagine that they'd think that was appropriate. And yet they do it anyway. Multi-box stream watching. Yeah, that's the trick. That's the trick. But how's it going? 3307. I call you that instead of master. I already have a Sith Lord that I report to. All right, so here's my idea. So here's like our block buffer. This is like a buffer that handles blocks specifically. And here's some of the problems with it. Like, to get the actual buffer, like the span buffer, we have to call like a function, like either read only or read write, and it will go into the game world and like actually get us the buffer, which is just in like, you know, a list of buffers. Technically a dictionary, but whatever. Be back later. Yeah, no worries. Enjoy the day. It's them. I don't know, Matthew. 2 clicks is a lot. You want someone to click the same thing twice on purpose? Not on accident? It's pretty tough. Master 3307, the game on YouTube is marked as faster than light because it's like that. Oh, is YouTube like this guy's playing faster than light because he mentioned it? No, what we're doing, I don't even know if you know what we're doing. I mean, I know what you know what we're doing today, but I don't know if you know what we're doing overall, which is we're making an isometric 3D version of FTL Faster Than Light. We're doing like the 3D chess version of Faster Than Light. We're like making it vertical. We're getting it vertical. There's gonna be like a bridge on top, and then like weapons rooms and like shields and systems and like reactors and cargo bays. I want to do it kind of more maybe RimWorldy, where like you know, there's more acknowledgement of like what's actually happening on a ship. Like, I want to avoid the joke of like there are no bathrooms on the Enterprise kind of joke. I actually want to have like a ship that has enough room inside it so that you can have like, here's the mess hall, here's like the barracks where people are sleeping. So like maybe you jump in and there's red alert and like half the ship is asleep and like they have to jump out and get out of bed and like run to their stations and stuff. Like maybe a fight breaks out in the mess hall. I want to do something maybe a little more simulation-y, something maybe a little slower paced. So I think what we're kind of thinking about. Matthew, you've watched them manage to click everything else on accident. Maybe it's too obvious. Yeah. What are the odds that someone is going to click on what they meant to click, not once, but twice in succession without accidentally clicking something else? It seems remote. The odds seem astronomical. All right, so like I was saying, so our current buffer, this is the only buffer we've actually implemented, which is the block buffer, which is the buffer that holds the blocks. So it holds all of the pieces that we construct these 3D ships out of. And like I was saying, if we want the span, we actually have to get the span. Like we can't just hold on to it because the span itself is a ref struct. So it's on the stack. So we can't just make it a field of a record struct or a regular or any other kind of struct or a class or whatever, like that won't work. So, and you can see the awkwardness of this kind of system. Here, I'm kind of blocking it with my head, but the function just above this, the getter default, which should either get us the thing out of the span or give us an empty block, which that's what I'm blocking with my head, is the empty block case. But like we literally have to pass in the span, or we have to pay the cost of pulling the buffer out each time this is called. And this gets called like 30,000 times. Hey, Fusionist. How's it going? Happy Thursday. I was hoping you were going to pop in here, because I think you were the one that shared on Discord this like insane thing. Like, what is this? I guess I could have just opened Twitter. I really don't want to open Twitter. But like, this is wild. Look at this other game. It's kind of doing what we're doing, but better on a larger scale than I could ever possibly imagine. Like, it's like an old SimCity kind of riff. What's it called? It's called like Metropolis 98 or something like that. It's like a retro. It's like so good. Look at these little duders walking around. The first shot of the like making the ceiling, the roof go away was so cool. I'm gonna go back to that once this is done. This is so cool. Whoever's making this, I want to say is probably like a roller coaster tycoon, like genius, like whatever technology. They probably have like a custom engine for this and everything, and it's all like instanced rendering or something like that. But this first thing that they do, this moment, shloomp, that's like the coolest thing I've ever seen. Shloomp. I could just watch this on repeat, just trying to understand what they do, where they just cut away each layer. I'm like, I won't get tired of that. Yeah, it's got a very Dwarf Fortress like layer visibility system. You can see it down here, but it's like isometric. This is so cool. This is me in 5 years. Yeah, we can hope. We can hope, Fusionist. How it goes? You're just chilling. It's cool. We've made up this concept called Refactor Week, where we like relax and we don't worry about implementing new features. And we're just like fixing some of our broken shit. Not broken, but stuff that could work better that we feel like normally we can't work on because we should be making new features. We already refactored the auto tiling system a bit in the last couple days, and now I want to work on some of the more underlying stuff with like some specifically dynamic buffers. Yeah, I don't know what we're gonna do. I like this idea. I feel like we'll do this like every few months or something. We'll just take a week and like just fix some stuff. That is insane looking. Yeah, it is, Matthew. Heavy roller coaster tycoon vibes. Yeah, I bet someone will come out and be like, yeah, I wrote that all in assembly. It's like, okay, roller coaster tycoon guy. That is an interesting artist name on the last track, Fusionist. Probably not written in assembly. I don't know. No, it probably isn't. But still, that was giving very like, there's probably some really smart instanced rendering or something even more like fundamental. There's probably something going on there that's really clever, because that was really slick, especially the thing I kept repeating over and over again, where they go down through the depths and then go back up and it just all renders immediately. Like, so cool. From a scale standpoint, we're doing like 100th of that, and we haven't gotten it nearly that fast. All right. They have a demo available? Oh, man, yeah, I gotta play it. Oh, yeah, they link the store page on there, don't they? Let me check out this store page. Yeah, Metropolis 1998. This is so cool. Yes box. What else have they done? Literally nothing. Cool. Oh, they put the demo out at the end of 2023. So this has been long in the making, probably. So cool. Oh, is this just in early access? Oh, it's coming soon to early access. Sweet. I'm gonna wishlist this later. Yeah, that was such a good find. This is so cool. It's got state-of-the-art traffic simulation, pathing around 100,000 plus people in vehicles, no more CPU death. Oh, this is so slick. It's low res like ours too. It's super low res. It's like double our resolution, but it's still like incredibly low res. It's all pixel art. This like Dwarf Fortress level simulation of the citizens. They're not just like statistical entities running around like in SimCity. They're not just like statistical representations. It's like actually, it sounds like it's actually a Walker model, like where there are actual simulated little citizens that are doing their thing. Super cool. Recommended 4 gigs of RAM, integrated graphics. They recommend integrated graphics. That's awesome. Non-mobile CPU, is this fair? Wild that it doesn't require any integrated graphics. I wonder how they're rendering it then. Or it doesn't require like a dedicated GPU. They can do it all. I mean, I guess pixel art is pretty easy, but they must have some kind of slick solution. Super cool. C++ and SFML. So yeah, custom engine. Oh, okay, yeah, that sounds right. Those are the minimum recs. Yeah, that's super, super cool. I'm going to keep an eye on that one. All right. So, like I was saying, I don't love this implementation of the block buffer. The thing is, I did some stuff last night. Like, we moved up to C# 13 because C# 13 added some really interesting things. Let me see if I can grab the right page here. Yeah. So we were looking at refstruct, which has all these requirements. However, starting in C# 13, a bunch of these requirements have been lifted. A bunch of cool stuff you can do that you couldn't do before. So I updated to C# 13, which involved updating to .NET 9, which Godot supports, which is pretty cool. If I was in Unity and I wanted to update to like a new .NET version, good luck, right? I'll wait a few years for Unity to actually support it. But Godot is like, whatever, we got this. So cool. Yeah, I gotta actually go back and look at what other new stuff I get from C# 13 because I picked it for very specific reasons. But yeah, so we still can't make our components ref structs, which is fine because we don't actually need them to be, because a lot of times we're not going to be constructing our components. We're just going to be pulling them straight out of the span. We'll just be indexing into the span, which is like the chunk that they're in. So that's fine. Like, it would be kind of duplicative to do that and then, you know, have them be a ref struct as well. That doesn't really make a lot of sense. And it's totally unsupported because read-only span will not accept. In custom stuff, you can have a ref struct be a type implementation, which is pretty interesting. Or a type, you can pass it in as a type, but not to something like this yet. Maybe soon, but because that's not really required and it would kind of be superfluous anyway, we're not going to worry about it. But what would be cool is if the buffers themselves could be ref structs, because if the buffers themselves would be ref structs, then when I create them, they could actually have fields on them that are these spans. They could actually keep a copy, not a copy, but, you know, they could keep a reference to their own spans. Pretty cool, right? Then we wouldn't have to worry about this getting the span and then passing it around with this thing. However, this can't be a component, right? So this block buffer is a component. It's a buffer component, but it's a component. So the address, the quote-unquote address of the buffer, like the component that associates the buffer to the entity, that needs to be a separate thing now, which is a little annoying. If I want to do it this way, that would need to be a different thing. So you'd have your component that's like, we'd call it like a buffer address or something like that, or I don't know, whatever. We could call it whatever we want. It could even be just a generic buffer component. We don't want it to be generic because then you could only have one. Then one entity could only ever be associated with one buffer. We don't want that. So that's a little awkward. But that would be okay because you would only need to use that component once. And then you could get your actual buffer out of it. And that struct could have things like RAABB on it, as well as the span that's associated with it, both in read-only and read-write forms. So that would be something like this. I wrote this thing, I called it the spatial buffer or whatever, because it's spatial in nature. It's generic, but it's spatial. So it has like an AABB where it gets like its dimensional information from. Like, how long is this buffer? How do we pull, how do we index into it using coordinates and stuff like that? So I wrote this up as kind of just an idea, an experiment of it, of like how this buffer would work. And the buffer could have different types. So like the obvious one is block, but you could imagine a different kind of spatial buffer we'd want. Like you could imagine one like, maybe you want one for atmospheric information. Maybe you have like an oxygen one that stores the like chemistry. Maybe it stores like what's the chemical makeup of like the atmosphere on this block. Like, is it vacuum? Is it oxygen? Is it something else? I don't know if we'll support other things besides, oxygen, and like it'll probably just be, is there oxygen or is there not oxygen? But you can imagine a more complex simulation where you're like also keeping track of things like carbon dioxide or something like that. So you could have like, an atmosphere that's not necessarily oxygen on a ship. And that could be cool if we ever supported like aliens. We could have like a Babylon 5 green zone or whatever, like where they had adapted the environmental controls to like suit different aliens. Like you can imagine some cool stuff. And then you'll also notice that I put the read-only and the read-write spans as fields, which I can do because this is a ref struct. So that's kind of cool. I don't know if I'm totally happy with how the constructor works, where like we have a parameterless construction, like base constructor, and then we have like a particular constructor so that if we get past a buffer ID, we can, we probably want to take the AABB out and put that here. It's probably what we actually want to do. Because I feel like we're never going to want an empty constructor. But anyway, if we have a buffer ID, like if we get past a buffer ID, then we can just grab the spans once, and then we just have them. Now, if we reallocate the buffer, we have to be careful that we don't try to continue to use this ref struct, but that's easy because a ref struct has a very limited lifespan because it just exists on the stack. So it's unlikely that we would store the spatial buffer and then like pull it out and like accidentally be using the, referring to the wrong spans or something like that. That seems unlikely. So I think this would be cool. I've got to decide how generic or how specific I want these to be, because having a spatial buffer like this is cool. And this could probably be generic. The thing that wouldn't be generic would be the component part of this. So we'd have a spatial buffer, and then we might have like a block buffer component. And the block buffer component is like the specific component that you attach to an entity saying this entity has a block buffer. And then when the block buffer talks to, or when the block buffer, you grab your block buffer component and you actually pull the buffer out of the world so you can actually use the buffer itself. in that case, maybe that's a spatial buffer with the type block, you know? So this could be kind of cool. This definitely answers some awkwardness that there is about, you know, having to carry multiple things around. There's still a bit of an awkwardness in that the component and the buffer themselves are separate things. But that's kind of the case already with the block buffer, because even though the block buffer is the component, you still have to just grab the spans and carry them around separately. Like, instead of this getter default where you have to pass in the span, for the spatial buffer, their getter default is just, you can't totally see it, but their getter default is just, they just access their own read-only property. They don't have to get a span or, you know, have it passed in as a parameter. It's like, this feels clean and this feels good, and I want to make this change. I just got to think a little bit about how I'm going to arrange the component part of it, the buffer component. Right now I have an interface, which is an iBuffer component, and this actually is not what we're going to do. So we can have this. We can still have this. We would get rid of the read only and read write, and we would basically say a buffer component needs a buffer ID and a length. I was looking at this, and this is a lot like our chunk, actually. And I kind of thought maybe we could arrange our buffers the way we arrange our chunks, because right now our chunk is just a memory and an item count. The item count is not in byte form though, which is maybe the only awkward thing. The item count is in like the actual item count of the type that the chunk represents. So it like, that information is not included here. Maybe it should be. Maybe it should have a thing where it like knows what type it is associated with. Maybe it doesn't matter because of the way that you access your component data. The way you iterate through component data, that probably never matters. So I thought about that as an alternative, and that is an option if we want to just have the buffer stored directly on. If we want it to be all self-contained, if we want the buffer and the buffer component to be the same, we could do it that way, and that's also an option and doesn't involve ref structs. But that would involve getting the memory's span a lot. So we'd end up carrying this memory struct around a lot. And then if we needed the span, we would just ask for the span, which should be a property on here. I'm not sure what's better, honestly. I'm tempted to Where's our span? I know memory has a span property. I'm pretty sure. And unlike span, memory is not a by-ref-like type, so we could hold on to it in a regular component. We would not need a ref struct to hold on to it, and that's tempting. Where do I get my span? Okay, so there's a span property. I don't know where it is, though. Here it is. This is a lot more complicated than just what we're normally doing when we get a span, which is just a memory cast. So when we normally get a span, like in world, like when we... Let me find it. When we get read-write buffer, it's just a memory Marshall cast from the memory... Well, it's still the memory owner dot span. So we'd still need to do this, and we'd need to do it a bunch. We need to do it basically anytime we're using it. So we would still have that problem of like, oh, what if you want to read the span like 30,000 times? And so if you're only carrying the memory around with you, then you still need to pay this cost of converting the memory to a span. You don't need to pay the cost of the cast, but I feel like the cast is the cheaper part, because casting a span from byte to T is like, all you do is you're changing the size, really, because it's just a pointer, basically. And then it just knows its size because it knows the size of T. So all it's really doing is that it's changing the length of the, or the way the span, you know, reads through the data. So this is cheap. This part's cheap, I think. The buffer memory map.span part, I think, is less cheap. Again, I haven't benchmarked any of this, but obviously this feels like there's a lot more going on here. But it could still be like, you know, eminently feasible. It's probably trivial performance from our standpoint. Which JetBrains ID is this? Writer? Yeah, it's Writer, because we're in C#. How's it going, Ownage Boat? Hey, Diginanigans. How's it going? Is there a read-only span option here? Or it's just span? Yeah, how's it doing? Welcome to the channel. We're thinking about some ways of structuring some of our data here. We're working on an FTL-like, but we're doing a silly thing that we're calling Refactor Week, where we look at some of our data structures and processes, and we think about potential improvements that we could make. And right now, I'm kind of fixated on these dynamic buffers. I say dynamic buffers. At the moment, they're just static, because I don't have a mechanism for reallocating them to different sizes. Right now, they're allocated once and then just used. I want to say that all of what we're talking about is deeply outside of my comfort zone in terms of programming. But we're still going to look at it and try to think about some, because we know our system even if we don't know that much about anything else. Yeah, we're working on a little FTL-like kind of game. I say little, but we're trying to make some architectural decisions that allow us to make it big. Ownage Boat, you love a good refactor. You just got through one yourself, exporting a bunch of code from the main exe to DLLs. Nice, nice. That's a nice thing to do. Well, welcome in. What kind of things do you work on? Are you also a Godot dev, or are you working in something else? Because we're in Godot. I wonder if the project is broken right now. It shouldn't be. We're working on this tool, on this editor tool, that's all about building these 3D structures. So we have this kind of thing, and we can kind of just build stuff. And we have an auto tiler that handles all the 2D tile renderings for us. So we can just kind of specify blocks and then just kind of build them out. So we can just kind of work on all this stuff here. It's very simple right now. It's very gray boxed. Oh boy, what did I do? Oh, I made a room full of doors and I didn't notice. Yeah, we have this kind of separation of concerns where we have this rendering world that's in Godot, and then we have this simulation world that's in C#. And they barely talk to each other. That's cool. Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, it's just a tool right now. We don't have a game. We've recently added like a selection layer kind of thing, so we can select stuff and then move it around. So we could select this useless chunk and like copy it and like paste it. This is kind of a useless thing to try to copy and paste because it's not very valid. But we're fighting some stuff here with the cutaway system, which is the thing that like hides tiles. Like you'll notice that we're cutting away a whole chunk of this thing we're trying to copy. It's kind of hard to see. So we've recently, the first thing we refactored was we split the layers between what's actually placed, which is this stuff is what I would consider the settled blocks, everything we've actually placed. And then this stuff that's the preview, which is like this thing that's following around my cursor. This hasn't actually been placed, but the auto tiler needs to know about it so it can do things like this, like hide outlines and stuff. So we've separated those buffers out and we're now, well, we haven't exactly done that, but we've laid the groundwork for doing that. But I got distracted because that no longer feels like refactoring. It feels like we're starting to make new features, but we'll probably get back to it by the end of the week. Right now, I went off on a tangent about our dynamic buffers that we're using to store all that block data. And I decided I wanted to work on that a bit. We're thinking about changing the way this works. Because right now we have this buffer component that knows where the actual span the data is, and it knows things about like its dimensions, and it has some helper functions on getting this stuff and using it. But the problem is when you actually want to use this stuff, what you end up doing is you grab the buffer component and then you pull out the span, and then you have to pass them around together if you want to use them. You even have to pass them back. Like if you want to use this span back on the buffer component that owns it, quote unquote owns it, you have to pass it back, which is super awkward. So in this getter default function, we actually have to pass the span back in so that we can use it. Otherwise, we have to pay for the cost of getting it back out and converting it. Because everything is being stored just as byte memories, byte type memories. So, and then it's being cast to the concrete type that we're actually dealing with. And that's nice because it means we can store them generically together. We can store things that are different type together and not worry about it, which is pretty useful for chunks and chunk components or component chunks and stuff, but less important for buffers, but still pretty important actually. Actually, probably the most important for buffers because we just have one big list of buffers. This is like literally our whole buffer thing. It's stored a lot like entities, except there's this final dictionary that maps buffer IDs to memory owners. The memory owners are all memory owner byte. And so we can just pull the span out from the memory owner. So the only thing we really need to do to make this dynamic is we need to be able to reallocate the memory owner and then update the buffer component. That's really all we have to do to make the size dynamic. So I think that's something we want to do. And I want to do this thing where the actual buffer itself, when you get it back, it's a ref struct, so it can hold its own spans. So you get this ref struct that has the information on it, all the helper functions and everything, because then you just need to use the buffer component for the buffer ID just to get the buffer. And then once you've gotten the buffer, that has everything. So you don't need to be passing around multiple things. You just pass the buffer around by itself and it has its span. It has, like, in the case of the block buffer, it'll have its AABB, so it'll know how to index into the buffer and everything. So I know I keep repeating myself. I'm trying to justify this change to myself as much as I am trying to explain it. That's usually what I do when I don't feel comfortable with the change I'm about to make. I usually over-explain it, just to make sure I understand what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. We're trying to chill. We're chilling, though. This is supposed to be a chill co-working space. I'm just excited about refactors, you know? Excited about refactor week. Ownage boat, nothing wrong with that. Sounds like a bit of rubber ducky, yeah. Rubber duck engineering, as you said. Yeah, it is. It is. I'm glad I spent a couple hours last night trying to understand what should be a ref struct and what shouldn't be, and I'm glad I did that. I am convinced that it would be good for the buffer to be a ref struct because it is something that has a very limited lifespan. It's something that we pull out and use and then get rid of. We don't need to hold on to it. It's never something that's going to escape to the heap, as it were, which a ref struct can't. So it's good. It's a shame we couldn't get it to work generically. Like literally the only thing stopping us is the fact that read-only span won't take a ref struct as a type, which is good and correct. But now we're on C#13, so we're able to do that for some other things, which is fun. So we have this generic spatial buffer. I think this is fine and a good way to start. So the block buffer is just a special buffer of type block. And so any buffer that needs this, so you could imagine a non-spatial buffer, like a linear buffer or something like that. And that buffer has a length, and you just index into it, and it's whatever. Whereas the spatial buffer is a 3D volume. So we need that AABB information, and we need some helper functions to assist us with getting the coordinates and everything associated with that. I know a lot of the helper functions are really just we're just wrapping around the AABB's helper function, but I would rather not have to always be like spatial buffer.AABB. Whatever. Even if that's exactly what's happening under the hood. I would like it if this was a fairly self-contained simple thing. I'm not sure I quite have the construction of this correct. I'm not sure I've set this up correctly. I need to think about that a little more. But anyway, Ownage Boat, what kind of stuff do you work on? You said you're refactoring some stuff from the main exe to the DLL, so you're obviously a programmer. If you just want to lurk, don't worry. You can ignore me. But I'm always very excited, especially when a new person comes in. I'm always excited to hear what they're working on. Same thing with, you know, all the regulars that are hanging out here. Diginanigans. I know y'all are busy. But I'm always excited to hear what y'all are up to. All right, we're like almost an hour into the stream and I haven't done anything yet except talk everyone's ears off. So let's look at some changes. So the first and most impactful change is going to be sorting out our iBuffer component. And so we could say block buffer. I feel like block buffer is kind of misleading. If we treat the block buffer as just being the component, I think that's weird. We'll probably call it block buffer component, or at least block buffer comp. We'll probably make a new block buffer comp. That's going to be the component side of this thing. It's not going to have the span or any of this stuff. I don't even know if it's going to have the AABB. I don't even know if it's going to store the AABB. It might need the AABB to know what its length is. Actually, I don't even know if it needs to know what its length is. Let's look at how we actually use the buffer component and make sure that we understand what's going on. So when we're making an entity with a buffer, right now we have two entities with buffers. that we're making that are used in construction. We have the settled blocks entity. This is what we were talking about when I was showing the editor. This is like all the blocks that have been committed to a point, to a position. These are all the things you built up and you said, I'm good with this. This is what we built. And then there's the preview blocks, which is that additional layer of like you're messing around with stuff and you haven't committed those changes yet. Usually by clicking. Not double clicking, Matthew. That's too much. Everything in this game is single clicks too far. So far. I don't think we can trust anyone to manage the double click. So what we do is we create the entity, then we add the buffer component. Right now we add the block buffer. I'm a little upset that we also have to pass in the component flag, but maybe we're gonna touch on that maybe next refactor week. The fact that we need to pass a type and the flag. We use the flag as like a type flag thing to do a bunch of quick stuff. But I would rather not have to do that. So what we do here is we also have to pass in an example of the buffer component, but that's not really true. We don't actually have to pass in an example of the buffer component. We just need to pass in a length, right? We could just take a length. I think we pass in a copy of the component because that's how add component works. When we do an add component, we pass in the value that we want to store, which makes sense because that's what we're doing with an add component. But with an add buffer component, it's a little different. Although maybe you do want that because what if... No. We can't really do it the same way because we can't really add... We can't really add an... I think I wrote this with the thing in mind that maybe when you add a buffer component, you can pass in like an actual buffer already. Like you can pass in a completed buffer, and maybe we can do that. Maybe you could create the spatial buffer, fill it, and then add it to the entity. Huh. Maybe that would work. Yeah, maybe that would work. Hey, Rhiannon Journey. How's it going? Happy Thursday. Max Killian, thank you for the follow. Appreciate that. How are you doing? We're so close to our follower goal, y'all. We're at 418. I think you know where we're trying to get to. All right, so add buffer component right now, it takes two types. The first type is the actual value of the component part. And then T2 is the type associated with the buffer. Okay. Excuse me. Rhiannon, you're doing good. You got here just in time to hear me say, I don't trust humanity to double click. And honestly, you agree. See, Matthew? See? Matthew Sparks is getting some pushback from some departments at work who are skeptical of users' ability to double click intentionally and consistently. And I think we all agree that those are serious concerns that have been raised. All right, so all we do right now is we get a buffer ID. Fine. We add that ID to the memory map with memory owner.allocate value.length times component.types component. So that's why we pass in the component flag, because that's how we map the component type size. Fine, fine. That's fine. I wonder... Okay, and then what we do is we... So then this is entity manipulation. We pull the entity out of its source archetype. We get it into the destination archetype with the component. This component is just a flag, though. There's no value associated with it, and that's maybe the problem. Maybe you should be required to... I mean, I guess it's fair. I'm wondering if I'm gonna require people to initialize the component before they, or initialize the buffer before they add it. Whereas add component is like more obviously easy to like actually submit a real value, which is what I would like to require people to do. Rhiannon, you've been doing UI on the web for 20 years and you just have to keep making them stupider and stupider. Oof. Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of crazy. You know, when I was growing up, there was this idea that like everyone was just going to get more and more tech savvy each generation. Like starting with my parents and then like, you know, up and up and up, just more and more tech savvy every generation. And like, that just isn't true. Rhiannon Journey, in your internal tooling, you get some freedom, but for your external user-facing stuff, you have to build like the person has never seen a computer before. Yeah, it's wild. It's wild. It makes sense. Like when you look at like Gen Z or whatever, they're more comfortable. Like Windows is becoming more and more, they're leaning more and more to like their like a phone interface, quote unquote. And like they're kind of trying to ditch the desktop interface as much as possible, like with their tiles and all that stuff. And it's because like people are like not as comfortable with desktop interfaces as they used to be. Yeah, people don't know what a file is. Exactly, Rhiannon Journey. It's crazy. It's really interesting. There's like a George Carlin quote from like the 70s, which is even more true now than it was when he said it, which was something like, never have we more depended on something understood by so few. That's like me paraphrasing, but he was talking about technology. He was like, we've never as a society more depended on something that is understood by such a small number of people. And that number seems to go down and down. And when you look at AI, like the fact that like nobody knows how an AI actually works, like how they actually, like people will tell you about how they learn and like how the model, you know, how the model learns and like whatever. But when you ask them how like they make their determinations, they're too complicated. People just can't, you literally can't look at that and say, oh, this is exactly the series of steps it's taking to arrive at this conclusion. Like, it's wild. We're just more and more all in on this technology that nobody understands. Says the guy making a game who's like, you know, I'm not much of a programmer, but what we're going to do is we're going to make an entity component system and we're going to manage our own memory in C#. Ownage boat, that's a good point. You feel fortunate enough that you had to actually read the manual. Yeah, exactly. I feel deeply blessed that like I had like a relatively technology-free childhood. That's kind of beside the point, but like, yeah, it's kind of interesting the arc of people, of people's understanding of technology. All right, so do we need all of these type definitions? That's like my question, because we submit an add buffer component, we define the first type, which we need to because we pass that in. However, this would be a ref struct, I think. Unless we're component. No, this is the component. So the component is T1. Then there's this T2, which is the iBuffer component's underlying type, which in this case is like block. I don't really use the T2 information at all. And one could argue it doesn't matter. But I would kind of like to use that information. So what we do is we pass in this value. We use the value's length, the value being the component, the actual component. Now the component type, which is this thing. Which I know is confusing because I just called it component instead of component type. This is the component value. We pass this in. We use this value's length. So that we do need. So T1. So T1. So when I say here where T1 is an unmanaged. Oh yeah, so T1 is an unmanaged iBuffer component. Yeah. T1 has to be an iBuffer component of T2. I don't even know if I need to define the T2 part, but I do currently. And that's fine because the T2 is not a ref. So we do this.
Most illogical.
Yeah, I know, Max Killian. This is all a disaster. Don't worry about it. This is my first entity component system that I've actually had to make. I've used them a lot, but we've been making our own. We haven't touched this code in like a few months, but it's refactor week, so we're doing it. How are you doing, by the way? I think we need to do it this way because we're treating it as a component, because these are components. We're adding the buffer component, not the buffer itself. And I think that is maybe a distinction that needs to be made. Maybe what we need to do is we need an add buffer. And when we add the buffer, we get the actual buffer back. And then once we have the buffer, we can add the buffer component. Maybe we break it up into those steps. So maybe we break this part out. And we build the buffer separately. And then we add the buffer component. Maybe that's a better way to do this. Looks good. Doing great, man. You're coming out of a Rust work day. Ooh, spending the time in the Rust. I appreciate the mail time emote. I actually just got I got a little SD card adapter. I couldn't find my SD card adapter. I just got one in the mail today. Because I'm going to a showcase on Saturday, and I'm actually bringing Mini Delivery, which is the game that emote's from. And I'm going to put it on Steam Deck, because I think it'll be really cute. And I'm going to show it there. And I'm a little concerned. I told them I'd bring my laptop, and I'd have a Following Wind remastered on the laptop. I'm a little concerned about that. Not because I'm concerned about the game, but more I'm concerned about, like, the showcase is at, like, a bar. I'm a little concerned about the life of my laptop there. Oh, well, it's insured. All right. So, yeah, so I'm just thinking about the construction of this component. Since we're rethinking about how not only the buffer component, but the buffer itself is structured. We're trying to move from our current block buffer, which is the component, and we're kind of splitting this into two things. We're splitting it into a buffer component, and yeah, we're splitting into a buffer component and a separate buffer ref struct for reasons that make sense. But I wish they weren't required. I wish read-only span and span took... I mean, I understand why they don't want to take type arguments that are also ref structs, but I understand why that's not a good idea. But, you know, sometimes you just want to, you know, you want to take a not a good idea. Okay, so if we do this, we keep the iBuffer component thing. And all iBuffer component defines is a buffer ID and a length. We've taken the required functions out of read-only and read-write span, which is just span. Oh, Diginanigans. Sorry, I missed your stuff. only computers in your house until you were a teenager or so was a DOS computer that all it had on it was a version of Asteroids and a text editor hooked up to a printer. Computer didn't have enough memory to have the text editor open while running the printer. That's hilarious. First proper computer you had was a Windows XP. Oh, it's quite a jump from DOS to XP. That must have felt incredible. Yeah, I really had, until I was like maybe like a preteen, I really had very little technology. I spent very little time, but then I kind of probably made up for it, you know, in middle school and high school. I was like all in on computers. Not in a useful way, not in like an I want to learn how to program sort of way. That was actually very late in my life that I decided that I wanted to do that. All right, so what are we thinking about? My brain is a little scrambled. We're gonna make a new buffer component. So we're gonna make a new buffer component. Let's just put it in here. I don't know about putting it in the buffer folder, but I'm gonna do it. We're gonna call this the block buffer component. We'll call it block buffer comp just for brevity, for the sake of brevity. So the block buffer comp, we'll put it, okay, it's in the correct namespace. It just needs to be an iBuffer component. Does it need to know what type it's the buffer of? I actually don't think it does, but it probably should. Just to enforce the interface a little bit. It should probably know its length. So integer length. iBuffer component block. Public. Yep. Yep. This could be read only. Oh, should this be a record struct? Do I care? I mean, I get some stuff for free when I make it a record struct, so I might as well. Rhiannon Journey, your first computer was a 486. Had the turbo button on the front. Nice. Nice. Max Killian, iBuffer 16 Pro. You're too funny. Hoggers. So the buffer ID is rarely... This I don't totally agree with. I don't totally agree with like not initializing it with the buffer. I could just have... I could declare this much differently. I could declare this without a... I could do like a one-line declaration for this, honestly. It'd just be this. The thing is, yeah, I kind of like the idea of registering the buffer and then the component. I kind of like that. I want to try that. In which case, we can just do this. We don't even need a primary constructor. Just one line struct declaration here. Kind of hilarious. All right, this is legal and sufficient for now. It's one of those times where I'm like, do I just have a file that declares all of these? When I have a bunch of these one line... I guess I actually don't want it to be one line. It needs to do a few things, doesn't it? Like, it needs to implement an equals and a hash code, doesn't it? Because I want to overwrite the default record structs hash code implementation. Okay. Make it more than one line. Oh. Don't worry about me. I can't use my keyboard. We could honestly implement an equals for any other buffer component. Yeah, we just compare the buffer ID. Maybe and the length. Should we also compare the length? Because that would let us know if it really is the same one, right? That's probably a good idea. Community toolkit.highperformance.helpers.hashcode. Oh. Let's use the regular hash code for now. I bothered to have the high performance toolkit, but like I don't totally understand how to use it. Yeah, let's just compare both of them. Yeah. Just for safety. All right, this is our new block buffer comp. This is the thing that we actually get out that associates the buffer with the entity. And then after that, we don't need anything else. We just need the buffer ID. I don't even know if we need the length, honestly. Maybe we do. I think it's good to know the length. It's almost like that's almost like having a version. Which, honestly, we could just put the version on the buffer ID then. Oh, the buffer ID also has a version. Oh, we never increment that. No, I guess we do. Because, yeah, a buffer index might be reused. So we do need the proper, like, index version ID system. So, yeah, holding on to length as well is fine, I think. All right, so we're going to try to use this as our new block buffer component. So when we make our new thing, what we're going to think about doing so we're going to try to say block buffer component and a block. I feel like I don't need block. Does block buffer component know its type? It does, right? It's an iBuffer component of type block. I don't want to box it, so I don't want to like... I think we just have the type declaration here just to satisfy the requirement that the iBuffer component type is unmanaged, but we could also just have that on here. I don't want to have a generic... We can't really have a buffer component T. That doesn't really work as a component, so we can't make that generic exactly. But how am I going to tell... I guess I just pass the flag. That's already what I'm doing, is just pass the component flag. So how can we do it so that we make the buffer separately? That's what we're thinking about doing. Where like you make the buffer and then you add the buffer component. So it would be something like world.add buffer. Add buffer. We probably need to know what kind of type of buffer we're adding. So we could say, let's say like a spatial buffer. The spatial buffer itself also has a type. I don't love this, but this might work. This is kind of a flail about and try to think about stuff kind of day. It's not as focused as I would like to be today. But that's okay. We're just, as long as we're hanging out, as long as we're making some progress, even if that progress is just understanding what we shouldn't do, it's fine. All right, so right now we add buffer component. We pass in a bunch of stuff. Pass in the entity ID, fine. I kind of like having the add buffer separately, because then that means we could get a buffer. That means we could have buffers that we associate with systems, right? Think about it. We could just get buffers directly if we have a separate add buffer instead of it only being add buffer component. If we have a separate add buffer, then like the tiling system could have its own buffer, like a merge buffer, which it actually does need. It needs a version of the block buffer that's like its own merge buffer that's like a working space that it can use to combine stuff. And that stuff doesn't need to be stored on an entity. Huh. Yeah, that's not bad. Let's do that. Let's explore that possibility. Add buffer. We do not need to pass in a buffer ID. What we need to do is, the only thing we actually really need to do is pass in. No, we don't need to pass the component flag either. We just need, do we just need a length? Is that all we need? And is that length in byte or, no, I guess we need to know the type, huh? Diginanigans, you're not as chatty today as you're neck deep in mapping out a few different application architectures and all the tech involved. That sounds awesome. It sounds more complicated than what I'm doing and requires more focus. So, by all means. Oh, we got a spam bot over on Twitch. Time to blast them. Favorite part of the day. All right, get wrecked. Got him. But I appreciate people hanging out. You don't have to chat. You should be able to lurk. I want to add a lurk command. I don't know what I would tell you, but you know, I want people to feel like they're happy to just lurk here. I don't have a problem talking to an empty room. It's like literally what I'm doing now. You'd think I would, but I've actually gotten so used to it, it's kind of scary. Like, I think I've told this story, but like I was at the beach like maybe a month or two ago. And I realized I was just sitting alone at the beach and I was just talking to myself. I was just verbalizing my internal monologue because streaming gets you into the habit of doing that. And it's kind of funny. Repo. Or maybe Repo. I'm gonna call you Repo. You're just working using me as your coworker? Sorry? You're building an app? No, sorry. If you want to share what you're working on, that's great. I appreciate that. Just the fact that you shouted out and let me know you're here, that's huge. That's great for me. Because we've never chatted before, and now I know you're here. And that's all you have to do. If you want to do more than that, great. I mean, you don't even have to do that. You can just hang out. People don't have to declare themselves in the channel. It's nice to check in, you know, but this is supposed to just be a chill co-working stream. And if that's what people are doing, awesome. I'm achieving my goal. I just like when people talk because it allows me to not work. It allows me to avoid working. But that's me. That's just me, right? All right, so all we're going to do when we add a buffer is we're going to get the buffer ID. I guess this can't be a void, huh? We need to get the buffer ID back. So add buffer. It is going to return. It's going to return. Oh. Here's the part. We need to return something. We could just return a buffer ID, actually, I guess. We do this. We add the buffer to the memory map. So value.length, we could just pass in length. The thing is, we need to know how much memory to allocate. So we could just say add buffer t. No, we need the, dang it. How do I calculate the size of t? I know I'm doing that in the component. Component.types. How are we getting the size of the component? Repo, you're building basically an e-commerce platform, but it's really more than that. It's more about logistics. You haven't built anything in C# for years. You're mostly a full stack JavaScript guy these days. You've been a dev professionally for 15 years now. That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I have a lot of experience in C#, but until I started using it at like the end of last year for this project, I hadn't touched it in like a few years. And yeah, during my day job, when I am programming, it's like JavaScript. So I feel you, but that's really cool. That's an exciting thing to be working on. Okay, size. So we can just use unsafe size of t. So when we say buffer add allocate its length times, we just need to add the unsafe stuff. Hold on. What is this thing that it's telling me? I recently changed the dev environment and it's kind of telling me some weird things. Reference assembly, system private core lib, import system.runtime compiler services. Oh, it's just telling me explicitly what we're doing. Okay, that's fine. So what are we using? Community toolkit.highperformance.buffers. Oh yeah, we are, huh? Interop services, compiler services. Okay. So yeah, so we just use the unsafe size of t, and so we just when we add a buffer, we just add a buffer of t. Integer length. I don't know if I want to return. I guess I do want to just return a buffer ID. That's the most flexible thing. Otherwise, I need to specify the difference between like a spatial buffer. Then I need a version of this for every kind of buffer. At least every generic kind of buffer, like spatial buffers or linear buffers or whatever I'm calling them. I don't know why I would call it linear, but I'm distinguishing spatial buffers because they're like volumes. I could also call that a volume buffer. Or a volumetric buffer or something. Repo, you built some fun tap and smash games back in the day. Just haven't touched it since. Seems like it grew in popularity since then. Too many languages now. You just pick one and go. Yeah, exactly. You can kind of achieve most of your ends with whichever language you pick. So, and honestly, I don't think you pick your language most of the time. I think your language is picked for you. Unless you're really able to spend the time. Like if I had unlimited time, like if I didn't have a job, I would sit down and I would learn C++, and we would be doing this in C++. But I'm just finding a few hours a day in between my day job to work on this game. And so it's like, do I want to spend that few hours learning C++, or do I want to spend those few hours making the game? And I'm already distracted because I'm just making tools. I haven't even really gotten to the game part of it yet. But it's still, there are just layers of problems like that. Like, do you want to work on the game or do you want to work on tools? Do you want to work on tools or do you want to learn the language? Do you want to learn the language or do you want, I don't know, whatever. Do you want to learn the language or do you want to explore other languages? Like, there's all these tangents that you could pop into, and I think it's important to push out of them as much as possible. Yeah, stay focused. Glutton for punishment. C++ is great, but so unforgiving. Yeah. I think if I wasn't in Godot, I think I would be interested in trying like Odin and some of those other like C-based frameworks. I think that'd be cool, but I'm not a programmer. You can spend a lifetime going down any rabbit hole. Isn't that funny how life works like that? I say I'm not a programmer because I consider myself a game dev generalist. Like on the flip side though, this is programmer art. I also say this is programmer art. So I'm very cagey about what I am. I'm like, I'm not a programmer, but also the art I make is programmer art. Just trying to make a game. And yeah, I could be a professional specialist along any of these dimensions. I could be like, I want to just be an artist. I'm not going to do that because I'm terrible at art. I found pixel art I enjoy. I picked up pixel art for this project and I enjoy it a lot more than I thought I would. You think it's a rad 8-bit style? Thank you. Yeah, we're playing into my strength, which is I can't do anatomy or anything like that. So we're just doing these very simple duders that are like 14 pixels tall or whatever. Yeah. Our tiles are very small. Our tiles are like 32 by 16. Super small tiles. Actually, they're less than that. They're 32 by 8. 32 by 16 would be isometric, but we're 32 by 8. We're dimetric. We have this kind of low side-on camera angle, which is unusual, but I enjoy that as well. I think it's more of a consequence of our brain that we're always trying to categorize things. All right, so buffer memory map.add buffer ID. So at this buffer ID, allocate this. At this buffer ID. So the only real difference between add buffer and like set buffer would be like we pass in the buffer ID and the length, and that would be our mechanism for reallocating. So memory owner byte.allocate length times unsafe size of t. Okay. And then we just return buffer ID. This kind of works. This might work. Should I define T, where like T is unmanaged? I kind of just do that everywhere just to make sure, because that's like a requirement. I guess that's not actually a requirement of the buffer. That's more of a requirement of the components. But whatever. I kind of would prefer to be dealing with primitives and stuff anyway. Repo. Yeah, but you got some chops, you can tell, because of my shading. I can draw. You can draw, you can make a picture, but shading is one of those rabbit holes you go down and get lost. You're a programmer, but you love graphics. You just call it a hobby, even though you do it a lot. We're definitely cheating. I appreciate what you're saying about shading. I definitely spent a lot of time on how really the only shading is on the floor. But yeah, I definitely was very conscious about that. I'm actually concerned about doing that in the game. I'm not actually sure how we're going to do that in a way that's dynamic. I'm a little concerned about that, but it might not end up being dynamic. It might end up being pretty static, and I think that's okay. But yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. But yeah, I can't freehand draw. That's something I literally can't do, but I love pixel art because pixel art does not require any freehand drawing capabilities. I recently learned how to do a circle in perspective in pixel art, which is fun. Kind of sidetracked my game jam, but it's a cool thing to learn. All right, so we've got our add buffer function, our new add buffer function, and then we're going to add a buffer component. So do we actually need the add buffer component function anymore, or is it just going to be add component? What's the difference between adding a buffer component and adding a component now that we've removed this part of it? There isn't any, right? I guess the only difference is the t value. No, but the t value we are passing in. Yeah, I think we can stop using this. The only thing is I have to get rid of this if component.isBuffer, throw new argument exception, which is fine. Let's try that. Let's try to swap to that. So let's try to split that. So add buffer. So it's not spatial buffer block. We're literally just saying block. Add buffer of block. And then we need to add in a length. The length is going to be board.volume. Well, we need to say variable buffer ID. You say block buffer ID. You can say block buffer comp equals. We can say block buffer comp equals. We can say variable block buffer comp equals new block buffer comp buffer ID or dot volume. A little awkward that I have to declare this twice, but it's not actually that bad. Repo, thank you for the follow. Appreciate the chat. Appreciate your hanging, the follow, everything. I appreciate you. Hope your app sounds cool. I hope you have good success with it. We're one away from our follower goal, y'all. All right, so we can take the block buffer component. And then what we do here is we say world.add component. And then instead we say block buffer component. So we pass in the entity. We pass in the flag, which there isn't actually currently a block buffer comp flag. Actually, it could just be called that, block buffer. And then what do we pass in as the value? It's just block buffer comp, right? We don't actually have to do it this way, though. We could put this in here. This is close to interesting here. Type argument specification is redundant. Is it not required? Oh no, it's not required, right? Because we're actually passing in a block buffer component. Repo, trying. It's been a pain in your ass. Logistically, a nightmare. It's coming along. You're trying to launch by next week. Oh, damn. All right. Crunch time, I guess. I mean, you said it's logistically a nightmare, but it's also, you said it's an app about logistics, so I hope it solves those problems. I hope it solves the, I'm sure you're talking about different logistics, but, hold on, I'm getting spammed. Oh no, the DMV is going to suspend my vehicle registration. Yeah, right. I don't have a vehicle. Thanks, spam. All right. I think we got about another 30 minutes. This is going to be a shorter stream. I know I always aim for 3 hours. This is going to be more of a 2-hour stream. I had to stick around work extra long today for a webinar that ended up being completely pointless for me. But I get certification credit for it, so I stuck with it. That took a lot of time. Repo. Yeah, you don't want to share on my stream. Oh, it's the cannabis industry. Been working on it for 2 years. More of a side project, but you got laid off last year. Your GF left, so you kind of went through it. I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah, that sounds like a lot to go through last year. You're working on 24/7, try to keep your head in the game. That sounds pretty cool. That sounds like I know people say the legal cannabis industry is struggling, at least in California. I don't know if that's where you are, but that's cool. You know, you got the entrepreneurial spirit, and I think when you're having a hard time, I think it's really hard to stick with something like that. But you're doing it, and that's cool. So I need to hold on to the buffer ID. I just want to get the buffer ID. I'm just gonna say buffer ID. Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna move this here. So buffer component, new buffer component value. This is kind of awkward, so I'm gonna do the thing that a lot of people really don't like, just blowing it out like this. I just like my braces, man. I don't know what to tell you. This offends me a little less. I still don't love that I need to, like, define a volume. Maybe I don't need to define a volume. Can I use the interface to simplify this? I know that's like boxing and whatever, but like, would that be an easier way to have this? Because I don't love this add buffer board volume. Like, I don't love having to repeat myself with the length here, where I just need to add buffer block. I do want to be able to just define a length and get a buffer ID back without having to get a component. I do like the idea of that. Repo, shit happens. You don't want to share the name because you don't know how me or visitors feel about it, so you try to respect it. Yeah, no worries. No worries. If you want to DM me, I don't mind. We also have a Discord. You know what's the real shame, Repo? Is you're my 419th follower. I think you need to unfollow, wait for someone else to follow, and then follow again. So you can be the correct number. The fact that you're my 419th follower is the funniest thing in the world to me. Get it to work first, then refactor, but I could set defaults unless it's dynamic, in which case. You almost follower snipe me. It was almost perfect, Repo. All right. Me talking it out is actually pretty cool. Not a lot of people do that. Well, here's the thing about me. I'm not currently monetized. The streamers you probably talk to more often are probably monetized, and they're concerned about it. Not me. I need about 600 more people to smash the like and subscribe button on YouTube before I think about stuff like that. Before I'm concerned about that stuff. I hope to, let's see if we look back on this and I've totally changed as a person, but I hope to never care about that. You know, beyond the point of, you know, Obviously, this is a curated community and don't come in here and mess around with people, but like that's the rule. The rule is like be kind to each other or be excellent to each other. I try not to have, you know, beyond that, I try not to be too much of a stickler for stuff. All right. Can I think of a way where I can have the add buffer return maybe it just returns an iBuffer component, which it is kind of stupid, but maybe we do it that way because we already are passing in T and it's an iBuffer component of T, right? Right? So can it be like, can we just say, can it return an iBuffer component of T? Can I can't return a new interface, right? Yeah, you can't create an instance of an interface. I'm just being lazy. This is like a really bad way to do it. I'm not going to pretend I understand interfaces to an extent. Rhiannon Journey, you need a Bill and Ted's guitar sound reward to play in stream. That actually is very true, Rhiannon Journey. I would love that. I'd also love some Rufus voice lines. Right now, we're kind of all in on Star Trek stuff, but something like that would be pretty great. Repo, same dream, bro. You always said if you ever made sick money, you'd sit there and not care about ads or monetization. You'd just sit there and do whatever you wanted on stream. Do you stream, Repo? Wow, your account is from 2013. That's pretty awesome. Oh, it says you technically stream World of Warcraft, but not in the last 60 days. You start streaming again, you let me know. Or maybe 30 days. I actually don't remember the VOD limit for Twitch. How do I get out an iBuffer component from this? I know I can't make an instance of an interface. And I know I shouldn't because that's all like boxing and horrible things. I guess I can create an instance of an interface. But should I is the real question. Oh, do I define it as an abstract interface? Is that why I can't do that? No, I don't do that. Also, abstract I don't think is a meaningful keyword for an interface. I don't use interfaces as much as I should. Oh, so if it's a class, I can do it, maybe. You create an instance of an object implementing an interface. Oh, so I could say... But how do I get the data back out? Let me see about this. You used to, not on this platform. You were in TechCrunch when you did. You were teaching people how to code. Okay, okay. Super cool. Repo, you still feel young. You turn 40 in a few weeks. You missed the whole streaming culture by a few years. Oh, fair enough. You're not much older than me. But I get it. I feel like I've missed a lot of this stuff too. Like, I don't understand TikTok. I especially don't understand a lot of media that's flying around. Like, I have a partner who teaches sometimes kids, like, art, and the amount of shit she has to deal with from the stuff that passes for, like, media. Not that the media of our childhoods was any good, but it's like this... What's the word they use? Brain rot? Crazy. I don't want to... I'm done. I'm not going to be the old guy yelling about brain rot on stream. Mainly because I don't want to alienate my younger viewers here. But, I know from my YouTube demographics that only other fellow old heads watch this. So I'm not too concerned. How do I get this out? Maybe I just don't care. Maybe I'm overthinking this. Maybe what we do is we pass in... Maybe we do it this way. What if instead of passing in a length, we pass in an I buffer component of T? Shenanigans, you would claim to still be young and hip, but your back disagrees. Yeah, and your hip's gonna start disagreeing too. Can I do that? Does this work? Oh, it's not a value type. I'm just trying some stupid stuff right now. None of this is going to work, but I'm trying some stuff. It's an init only property. Yeah. Trying to find a generic, not a generic way, but a way to do this where I don't have to be... Maybe I don't pass along the length. I probably should. I think this is just cleaner. I think we just do it like this. All we get back is the buffer ID. So we already know the length. I wanted a simpler, not a simpler. I get really obsessed about not like repeating myself. And in context where it doesn't matter, like it doesn't matter that I have to pass in the length twice here. That's like a stupid thing to care about and waste time on. But there's some aesthetic things that I will waste my time on stuff like this. And honestly, for today's stream, if we just swap this add buffer component thing with the add component, if we just make this work with an add buffer, with a separate add buffer and then an add component, I'll be happy. I actually don't even know if we have time to make this change. Might need to think about this a little more. Should add component like return the component? No, it doesn't need to, because normally add component gets passed in a component, doesn't it? What if we just did this instead? So I don't have a constructor that just takes a volume, huh? And it's kind of meaningless to pass in a buffer component with only a volume. Maybe we don't necessarily need to initialize the buffer. I mean, it would be good to... Like, what are my options for allocate? Oh, it won't tell me. Yeah, we kind of need to allocate the size. Doesn't really make sense to add a buffer without telling it what the size of the buffer should be. Otherwise, I would just need a separate set buffer step that would actually do this. Memory owner have an empty property? I feel like it does, honestly. Yeah, public static memory owner empty. We could honestly just add an empty buffer. We would just call it add empty. Add empty buffer or something like that. We could say add. We could say add buffer. We could have a parameterless add buffer where we just add an empty buffer. Memory owner type dot empty. Just do this. We could just return. And this way we just have a buffer in here. In which case we don't actually need the type, huh? We just say add buffer. This is kind of stupid. I don't think this is the way we want to do this, but I want to look at it. I want to at least look at it, you know? So what if we say block buffer comp world.add buffer parameterless? Oh, we don't even need to tell it what kind of buffer. This is really dumb because what we're doing is we're adding a buffer component and we're telling it what the buffer's length is going to be, but we're not actually setting that. I mean, that might be a useful thing to have sometimes if you want to reserve a buffer but you don't know what its size is going to be yet. But I think for our purpose, that's kind of stupid. I just want to get something back out of this that has the buffer ID and the length. I guess I could declare the component first. What if we have multiple types? Can't really declare a new type. T1 where T1 is an unmanaged iBuffer component of type T2. Does this make sense? Cannot resolve symbol T1, so we can't just return a generic type like this. No, that doesn't make any sense. I'm like dancing around the most obvious way to do this because I'm unsatisfied with having to pass in the length twice. That's such a stupid reason to pause. But it is refactor week, so let's just do this. Let's move on. And then we can come back. I can think about this tonight if I want to do anything more complicated, but this should be sufficient. Ownage boat. the 420th follower. That's my air horn sound. I don't actually have an air horn sound. Here, I've got something. Let me see what I can do.
You're out of your Vulcan mind, Spock.
I hope you heard that.
Maximum warp.
You once brought an air horn into work that got shut down real quick. Yeah, I bet. Well, thank you. Thank you, Onage Boat. Thank you for being the 420th follower. Blaze it. All right, well, that was like an hour and a half just to decide how I wanted to change my add buffer to a separate add buffer and an add component. What do we normally get back from add component? Do we get anything back? What else? What other problems do we have with our current setup? I might get rid of block buffer in its current form, just so I don't have to call this block buffer comp, and I can just call it block buffer, and it's an iBuffer component. And then we'll have this spatial buffer T, and spatial buffer T will be a spatial buffer block, and this will be the buffer that this will be the buffer object that we make. So how does this part work? So we need a buffer ID and an AABB. So we actually got to make this. So hold on. How are we getting this out? This is what should be actually in the span. In the buffer span. So wait. This is what should actually be getting recorded. I guess not. I guess not. This is just the construct that we make. So when we reference this, we say new spatial buffer. So like we've declared this thing, so we could say, so now we can say something like variable spatial buffer equals new. So we could say it could be new spatial buffer block, and we pass in, oh, we didn't store the buffer ID. Let's store the buffer ID. World, oh, we could say variable buffer ID equals, so we'll do it like this for now, just for this purpose. Yeah, I really don't like this. I don't like the way this works. Maybe we should be able to create a block buffer component that with just a length, and then we can initialize it with like a, I don't know, whatever. There's an aesthetic that I don't like, but I acknowledge the fact that the aesthetic is like largely meaningless. All right, so now what we would do if we actually wanted our buffer. So if we actually wanted to get our buffer back out, now that we went through this whole process of adding the buffer and then adding the component that is the component buffer. So what we would need to do if we wanted this, we would need to first get the component. So we should actually probably store this component just so we already have it. Variable component equals world.add. Oh, we don't actually get that component back, do we? Right, so we need to get the component. So we would need to say, we would say variable buffer component equals. The thing about the buffer component is I would like to just have one, but that doesn't work because of the way archetypes work. That would limit each entity to only ever having one buffer, and I don't think that's practical or realistic or good. I think that's an unnecessary constraint. So we need different kind of components. Godot is C#. Hey, real Sierrios, Cjarios, however you pronounce that. Welcome in. Godot is C#. Yeah, we're doing something weird. We've separated our simulation layer out from the rendering in the UI. So all the rendering in the UI is in Godot. But we have this separate simulation layer that's running on like an entity component system with all these very lightweight simulation objects. And that way we can keep the scene tree in Godot very like clean. Like it's just stuff that currently needs to be rendered or interacted with. I'm trying it out. It seems like a weird approach. Probably unnecessary, but welcome in. Nice to have you here with us. We're probably wrapping it up soon, but I'm glad you found us. How are you doing? We'll be back tomorrow either way. All right, so buffer component would be world.getComponent. Block buffer component. World.settled blocks. Technically this won't work. Component.flags.blockbuffer. I need to rewrite the flags for our new component type, but I'm tempted to just replace blockbuffer with the blockbuffer component. I just don't like it. So it might be a little uneasy that this is a component and then the buffer itself is something else. So I might just continue to call it block buffer component, but I don't know. So we get our block buffer component. And then what we can do now is we can get the spatial buffer. We would say the spatial buffer is a new spatial buffer of type block. And we would pass in the buffer component. Technically, we would just need the buffer component's ID. And then we would need the AABB, which we know is... we know it's the buffer components.AABB, which it has. Oh, is that inaccessible? Oh, because we don't actually know that it's got an AABB. That is a problem. We need to figure out how we're going to do that. So we actually need that information. So maybe the block buffer component needs that information as well. So we can cheat right now because we actually know what the AAB is that we're using. Board. And so when we create this new spatial buffer with this buffer ID and this AABB, what the spatial buffer should do is it should go and it should get the read-only buffer and the read-write buffer for itself. This is a little, I feel like eventually this might, if we do like dirty flags or something like that, this is like really stupid. We might actually want read, we might want like a read version or a write version of these. So you get your buffer and you specify that you want a read-only version of the buffer, and that's all you get. I have a nice website made with WordPress. Oh my God, please don't hack my website. It's really lazy. Yeah, it's made with WordPress. I need to remake it in something better. All right, pre-rolls are on. The font could use some work on it. It's a bit rough on the eyes. It's my own font. I made this font. No, it's not a good font. And I actually think WordPress makes it worse because it's not in its original pixel form. It's like fontified, so it's like blown up a little bit. Like you can kind of see in the title the way it's blurred together a little bit. I'm actually not going to use this font anywhere. It's not going to be good in the game. It's just something I made and used because I made it. I use it on like the title card and stuff. Just needs to be resized. Yeah, a little bit bigger could be good. Can you have the username to hack it? No, if you're going to hack my website, I expect you to do it yourself. I'm not going to help you. And the password in base 64. You're too funny. All right, well, we need to pause on this for today. I need to think about this whole, why would we want... We're probably going to want a system that can tell whether we've written or read, whether we've written to a buffer or not. So accessing the read-write buffer should probably tick over like a version change. So we probably don't want a buffer struct that has both the read-only and read-write buffers. We probably want to split that into like a read buffer and a write buffer. Yeah. Okay. That's fine. I kind of know what we want to work on tomorrow. I want to keep working on this buffer stuff. I want to make this buffers dynamic, and I want to split them up a little bit like I was describing. I think that'll be cool. Kind of broken right now, but that's fine. I could probably fix it right now, but I want to leave in place some of this stuff. And then I'm going to think about a couple things tonight, maybe about how to get my component back when we add the buffer. Okay, cool. I'm reasonably pleased with our progress. Obviously, we left the game in kind of a weird state, but, you know, sometimes that's okay. So, appreciate everyone who's hanging out here today. Appreciate everyone who didn't hack my website right now. I'll look at making the text a little bigger. It does look like I have a little room. I don't know. I kind of optimized it for mobile. I think it's pretty readable on mobile, but obviously on desktop, it's like kind of trash. So maybe there's some changes I can make to better accommodate that. Assuming I don't just recreate it in like card or whatever. But yeah, I really appreciate everyone who hung out with us today. Especially all the new followers. I really appreciate hitting our follower goal of 420. The username is not admin. I know, it's like I'm trying. Cheers, dude. Have a good evening. Thank you. Thank you, Ownage Boat. You as well. Appreciate you being our 420th follower. Good luck to you as well, Repo. I think your app is going to be good. I hope to hear some updates in the future about it. Real, thank you for doing some penetration testing on my website. But yeah, thank you all so much for watching. Diginanigans, see you later. Yeah. Appreciate you. See you next time. We'll be back tomorrow. Same time, same place, same problems, probably. Bye.